We're dropping knowledge on Grambo Bros.
So what is topping? How do we do it, and when do we start it?
So topping is when you cut the amyrical stem at the top, and what it does is it stops that growth, the hormones that were making the plant grow up, and if you didn't top it, it would have had that traditional Christmas tree shape. But when you do top it and starts to push out, it allows you, like I said, for all those secondary and tertiary stems to catch up to the top stems, and then they can go kind of all up together so that you have a nice even canopy all the way across. I'm trying to remember exactly what it's called, but the candle, like the Jewish candle, that's kind of the menorah. Yeah, there you go. The menorah, like that's like what you're like, you want it to look like that if you're training, at least in my eyes. And for me, like training starts super duper early. Like when I put my plants when I take them out of the clone cube and put them into just the little, it was like 4x4 squares. I'll start topping them when I start to see it wants to start taking off. When I see that the plant is like rooted and wants to start growing rapidly, I'll top it right there. Depending on what the secondary and tertiary stems are doing, I'll put maybe or maybe not an LST clip on there, which is a low stress training clip. So like before, you used to have to bend the stems and like work them and make them pliable. But now with people that sell the LST clips, you can just walk up to your plants and like throw these clips on, and it does that job without you having to work the stem. So it's a little bit less stress on the plants. And then if you forget to go back, the clips will just break off. But there's a lot of different ways. Like I don't really super crop necessarily. That's usually something that I'll do if something's getting too close to my lights. So like if in flower, I notice that something's taken off and there's like a cola or two that are, going up higher than the others. Like I may or may not super crop those colas to, again, just try to maintain as much of an even canopy as I can so that I'm getting even light distribution across the whole canopy. So it's just, like I said, again, kind of like having the different techniques in the toolbox so that when a situation arises, you can handle it appropriately with, being able to hopefully increase your yield and not having to sacrifice anything.
Yes, exactly. Well put. It's like a 3D menorah. It's like, you get them going in every direction. It's it's very fun you pull the tops, all those auxins and everything start flowing down.
What what experience do you have with training in your garden? Because what size is your garden? I grow in a 10x10, so what I do might be a little different than what you're doing.
Well, I have the two distinct phases of my growing career. I had the pounds are worth 3,000 era of my growing career, and I had the pounds are worth 900 era of my growing career. And those are so back in the day, I was a room grower. I had grow rooms. I didn't grow in it's like Bane. I was born in a grow room. Some mountain. And by then it was blinding, so it was like, I had I ran a 16 lighter for years back in the day with a flip box. And then, so we'd have one flower room A would run from noon to midnight. Flower room B would run midnight to noon. And then, so the ballasts were just running 24 hours a day, and we'd just be flip boxing that shit. And so back when I was doing the full rooms, and then once I built out my grow room, I had a nice little 6 lighter that I really loved in a single car garage. And it was one of those things where it was very much, I was a scrog grower. So I always I would scrog out everything. I'd get all my trellis net going. And I just I'd put like 3 plants under each light. Don't do the math on how many plants that was. It was 12. Don't do the math. And
that's all it was.
I was always a big fan of, I did super crop a whole shitload. I'd go in there and I would break that little Cambria layer inside there, And I remember reading an article back in the day, way before I ever worked with the Dude Grow Show. I was a big fan of the Dude Grow Show. And Jay Maestro was the wealth of knowledge back in those days. So I actually still to this day have a little folder, a little notebook just called Jay Maestro Notes. And he said something that, and if he's in the chat, I'd love to hear from him on this subject. I don't know what the validity of this is or is not, but he'd always say when you break when you super crop or high stress train a plant, it gets that big knuckle, right? You get that big knuckle.
I was gonna say I love the knuckle, dude. Yeah,
the knuckle. Yeah, you get that big moose knuckle. You just want to bite it. And so he said, "Fuck a knuckle. I want my whole plant to be a knuckle." So it was all about like you wouldn't like hurt it, to the point where like knuckles would form, but I'd go through, and sometimes I'd use pliers and I would just break. I just got chop all the way, because sometimes my fingers would get hurting and callous, and it would be brutal. So I just take lightly with some pliers, and I would just fucking break all of the layers in there, and they fucking fall over looking half dead. And then, we all know what it is. The next day, they're all good, and they're back to good. And so I would super crop the living F out of it right from the bid. I would top them. I don't know. I'd probably do four rounds of topping, probably somewhere in that neighborhood. It's funny to think back when I really looked to those days. He was like, I don't really remember. You just kind of look at it, and once you've been growing so long, you just kind of look at it and you go, this is what it needs. And it's cultivar dependent. So like you said, like some plants start off hot, and there's going to start hitting up into your lights if you don't do something early. And some things are short and squat, and you don't really got to play with them for a long, long time.
Those are the fun plants for me, is the ones that are small and stout. And you kind of just like, once you get them into flower, they just kind of do their thing and they stay nice and uniform. And if you've got a whole table of them, they all will stay nice and uniform, which is like a grower's dream. A lot of those smaller plants that I've noticed tend to have a lot of leaves though, like, because you're mashing all that plant matter into a smaller package. So that is one of the downfalls that I tend to not love about plants that size. A lot of like skirting, a lot of deleafing. But I mean, that's just comes with the job. But that's like other training too that I feel like doesn't get talked about as much as like, what are people's like how do you do your flipping into flower transition? Like for me, I went through and like did a super heavy lollipopping on my plants to the point where there's like 3 nodes on every stem. And I took most of the leaves off, and I'm flipping tomorrow. And I did that because the plants are going to double in size. There's going to, another 2 to 3 nodes is going to grow in during the stretch while they're, developing those bud sites before they actually start to set in and, go to week 3 where you're getting the pom-pom phase. So for me, it's like, I don't want any of those nugs below that like 5 or 6 nug point, because it's just larf and a lot to trim and takes away the energy from the top bud. Like, so I like to go into flower with like almost naked plants. But that's just how I like to do things. And then on day 21, I can do like a light follow-up and defoliation. And then usually at that point, I don't have to touch my plants again. I just kind of set and forget and make sure that all the feeding is right and they do what they do.
We dropping knowledge on Grambo bros.